It was a rainy afternoon in San Salvador. The streets were quiet, covered by the dim light of the street lamps reflecting on the wet pavement. Nayib Bukele, the president of El Salvador, had decided to go for a walk after an exhausting meeting. He needed to clear his mind away from the hustle and bustle of politics. Accompanied only by his cap and his characteristic calm demeanor, he walked aimlessly, lost in his thoughts. Suddenly, something stopped him in his tracks. Across the street, he saw an elderly woman sitting on a cardboard box wrapped in an old blanket. Her face reflected the weight of the years and the harshness of life on the streets. But there was something about her that seemed strangely familiar. He approached slowly, trying to recognize her, and when their eyes met, time seemed to stand still. "Maria?" Nayib Bukele asked in disbelief, while a mix of surprise and sadness was reflected on his face. The woman looked at him intently, and after a few seconds, a faint smile appeared on her lips. "Nayib, my boy." It was her, Maria, the woman who had cared for him when he was just a child, his childhood nanny, the one who had always been by his side, giving him love and protecting him in the most difficult moments. But now fate had led her to live on the streets. Memories began to flood Nayib's mind. He remembered how Maria would take him by the hand to school, how she would tell him stories before bed, and how she always had the right words to comfort him when something went wrong. How was it possible that she was now in such a heartbreaking situation? Without hesitation, Nayib knelt beside her and took her hand. "Come on, Maria. You can't stay here. I'll take care of everything." Maria tried to smile, but tears began to roll down her cheeks. She felt ashamed but also deeply moved by the gesture of that boy she had loved so much, who had now become one of the most important leaders of his country. Nayib took her to a nearby cafe so she could warm up and have something to eat. As they served her a cup of hot coffee, she began to tell him everything that had happened in her life since they parted ways: the loss of her family, the economic hardships, and finally the loneliness that led her to the streets. The president listened attentively, moved by every word. He couldn't understand how someone so generous and full of love had ended up in such a precarious situation. It was at that moment that he made a firm decision. He couldn't allow Maria to continue living like this. He would do everything necessary to restore her dignity and security, no matter how much time or effort it took. He would ensure that she had a new opportunity in life. And so, as the rain continued to fall gently on the streets of San Salvador, a new chapter began for Maria, driven by the love and gratitude of that boy who had never forgotten her. Back at the cafe, Maria took a sip of her hot coffee while Nayib watched her intently. His gaze was filled with nostalgia, and as she spoke, memories of his childhood flooded back to him like an unstoppable torrent. Every word from Maria transported him to those happy days of his childhood when she was much more than a nanny. She was a second mother. Maria began to recount how life had taken her down unexpected paths after leaving the Bukele family home. She had worked in different places, always hoping to build a better future, but circumstances were not always fair. The loss of her husband and her only daughter had been a devastating blow, and little by little, life left her without resources or support. After that, Maria paused, trying to hold back her tears. "I was left alone, without family, without a place to go, and here I am now." Nayib felt a lump in his throat. The Maria in front of him was the same strong and generous woman who had cared for him with so much love. But now she bore the marks of suffering and abandonment on her face. He couldn't help but feel a deep sadness, but also immense gratitude for everything she had done for him. "Maria, you were always my family," Nayib said, holding her hand tightly. "Now it's my turn to take care of you." At that moment, Nayib remembered the afternoons of his childhood when Maria would take him to the park and tell him stories to make him laugh. He also remembered how she comforted him every time something went wrong at school and how she always had the right words to motivate him to keep going despite the adversities. She had never stopped smiling. She had always been there for him, giving him her unconditional love. And now, more than ever, he felt he had to return all that love and support. "Do you remember when we used to make pupusas together?" Nayib asked with a smile. Maria let out a soft laugh, the first in a long time. "Of course, you always ended up covered in dough, but you loved to help," Maria replied, her laughter filling the air with warmth as they reminisced about those happy moments. It was as if time had not passed, and for an instant, the hardships of life faded away. But Nayib knew that the reunion was not enough. He had to do more. His mind began to work quickly, thinking of how he could help Maria regain the stability and dignity she deserved. The first step would be to find her a place where she could live peacefully, away from the streets. He would also ensure she received medical attention and everything necessary to restore her health. Maria, overwhelmed by the unexpected turn of events, couldn't help but feel emotional. After so many years of struggle, life was finally giving her a new opportunity. "Thank you, Nayib. I never thought we would see each other again, and certainly not like this," she said with tears in her eyes. "Fate brought us together again, Maria, and this time I won't leave you alone," Nayib promised. His words were not just an expression of affection, they were a declaration of intent. He was not the kind of person to leave things half done, especially when it came to someone who had been so important in his life. That night, as he returned home, his mind was racing. He needed a plan. He couldn't just offer temporary help, he had to ensure Maria had a dignified and stable life. The next day, Nayib woke up early, determined to take action. The first thing he did was contact his closest team to tell them what had happened. He explained who Maria was and the situation she was in. He knew he had the necessary resources to help her, but he wanted to do it in a way that was truly meaningful and sustainable. "I want Maria to have her own home and the medical care she needs," he said with determination. "It's not just about helping her for a few days. I want to give her the dignity and peace she deserves." His team, moved by the story, immediately got to work. They looked for housing options, doctors willing to offer free care, and support programs for people in vulnerable situations. Every detail was carefully planned to ensure Maria had everything she needed to start a new chapter in her life. Meanwhile, Nayib decided to visit Maria again, this time not just to talk but to bring her good news. When he arrived at the same cafe where they had met days before, he found her waiting with a shy but calmer smile than the first time. "Maria, I have something important to tell you," he said, taking a seat across from her. "I've been thinking a lot about everything you told me, and I want to help you change your life." Maria looked at him with a mix of surprise and emotion. She had never expected so much after years of living day by day, struggling to survive. "I don't know what to say," she murmured, trying to hold back her tears. "Just thank you." "You don't have to say anything," Nayib replied. "I just want you to know that you're not alone. From now on, things will be different." That same afternoon, Nayib took her to visit the place he had found for her, a small but cozy apartment in the city center. The walls were freshly painted, the furniture was simple but comfortable, and the windows let in warm, natural light. Maria stopped at the door, unable to believe what she was seeing. Her hands trembled as she explored every corner of the apartment as if fearing it was all a dream. This is for me?" she asked, not daring to fully believe it. "Yes, Maria, this is your new home," Nayib replied with a smile. "Here, you can start anew without worries." Overwhelmed by emotions, Maria sat on the small sofa in the living room, covering her face with her hands as tears streamed down her cheeks. Nayib sat beside her, placing a hand on her shoulder in a silent gesture of support. "I don't know how to thank you for this," Maria said between sobs. "I never thought something like this was possible. You did so much for me when I was a child, Maria. You cared for me, loved me, and never asked for anything in return. This is the least I can do for you." In addition to the apartment, Nayib had arranged for a complete medical checkup to ensure Maria was in good health. He also contacted a local foundation to offer her psychological support and emotional companionship. He didn't want to leave anything to chance. In the following days, Maria began to adapt to her new life. Little by little, her face regained its lost glow, and her smile became more frequent. The neighbors in the building, upon learning her story, welcomed her with open arms. It was as if the entire universe had conspired to give Maria the second chance she so deserved. But Nayib knew this was just the beginning. He wanted to ensure that Maria had a purpose, something that motivated her to move forward every day. "Maria, I know you've been through a lot, but I'd like you to consider something," he said one day while they were having coffee in her new home. "Have you thought about helping other people who have gone through similar situations?" Maria looked at him thoughtfully. The idea was new to her, but slowly she began to understand what Nayib was proposing. "You mean working on something like a foundation?" she asked, a spark of interest in her eyes. "Exactly. No one better than you to understand what these people need." The seed was planted. and Nayib knew that Maria had the strength and experience necessary to become a true source of inspiration for others. The proposal resonated in Maria's mind for days. It wasn't easy to assimilate what was happening. After so many years of struggle, she was presented with the opportunity not only to rebuild her life but also to become a beacon for others going through the same. Maria remembered her most difficult years, those when she wandered the streets seeking shelter, facing cold nights and indifferent glances. She knew what it meant to feel like there was no way out, that the world turned its back on you when you needed it most. The idea of being able to lend a hand to others in that situation began to ignite a flame of hope within her. One afternoon, Maria called Nayib to give him her answer. She found him in his office reviewing some documents, but upon hearing her voice, he knew something important was about to happen. "Nayib, I've been thinking a lot about what you proposed," she said, trying to control her emotion. "And the answer is yes. I want to help others like you helped me." Nayib set the papers aside and gave her a look full of pride. He knew that this moment marked a new chapter in Maria's life. "I'm so glad to hear that, Maria. You have no idea how important your testimony can be for other people. Let's work together on this." The following days were a whirlwind of activity. Nayib moved heaven and earth to organize everything necessary. He contacted organizations already working to support homeless people and proposed a collaboration to create a new program led by Maria. The project was called New Dawn, a name that perfectly reflected what it meant for Maria, a second chance, not only for her, but for all those who had lost hope. From the beginning, Maria committed to every detail. She visited shelters, spoke with people, and shared her story, showing them that it was possible to move forward. The impact was immediate. People listened to her attentively, inspired by her strength and resilience. Maria was not a distant figure, she was one of them. She knew their fears, their struggles, and spoke to them from the heart. One day, while visiting one of the shelters, a young woman approached her timidly, carrying a baby just a few months old with a look full of sadness and exhaustion. "Maria, thank you for what you do," the woman said, tears in her eyes. "I didn't know how I was going to keep going, but hearing you has given me hope." Maria took the woman's hands with affection and replied with a smile, "You're not alone. There's always a way out, and we'll find it together." That was just the beginning. Little by little, the New Dawn program began to grow, reaching more people and changing lives. Nayib closely followed the project's progress, often visiting the support centers and ensuring Maria had everything she needed to continue. But it wasn't always easy. There were days when the exhaustion and challenges seemed too great. Maria faced heartbreaking stories, people who had lost everything and weren't always willing to accept help. Sometimes the shadows of the past reappeared, reminding her of the darkest moments of her life. However, every time she felt she couldn't go on, she remembered Nayib's words and the promise she had made to herself, never to give up. She knew that every small step she took was a victory, and that her work was making a real difference. One afternoon, during a meeting of the New Dawn team, Nayib took the floor to address everyone present. "This project wouldn't be possible without the commitment of each one of you," he said in his characteristic firm yet approachable tone. "But I want to especially highlight Maria. She is the heart of all this, and her story is a reminder that it's always possible to start anew." The room filled with applause. Maria, visibly moved, stood up to express her gratitude. She wasn't a woman accustomed to receiving praise, but at that moment she understood that her efforts were bearing fruit. "All this is thanks to you," she said, looking at the team members. "Each of you is making it possible for more people to find their own new dawn." That day, Maria realized she had found a new mission in life. She was no longer just a survivor. She was a leader, a guide for others who were on the same path she had once walked. And although there was still much to be done, she knew she was not alone. With Nayib by her side and the support of so many committed people, she was ready to face any challenge that came her way. The success of the New Dawn program began to transcend the borders of the city. What initially seemed like a small community support project quickly became a model for other initiatives. The media started to take an interest in Maria's story and her work alongside Nayib Bukele, highlighting the positive impact they were generating. Maria was not used to being the center of attention. She had always preferred to stay in the background, focused on her work and the people she helped every day. But this time was different. It wasn't about seeking the spotlight. It was an opportunity for more people to understand the importance of the program and how they could be part of the solution. One day, while reviewing some documents in the project's office, her phone rang. It was Nayib, and his tone was filled with excitement. "Maria, are you sitting down?" he asked with a slight laugh. "Yes, why?" "What happened?" she replied, intrigued. "We received an official invitation to an international event where they want to recognize the work of New Dawn. It will be at a conference on social inclusion in Geneva. They want you and me to be there to share our experience." Maria was speechless. She had never imagined something like this could happen. Traveling to another country, standing before an international audience, and sharing her story was a huge challenge but also a unique opportunity. "Do you think I can do it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Of course, Maria. No one better than you to tell this story. You just have to speak from the heart as you always do." The days leading up to the event were filled with preparations. Nayib and his team helped her prepare her speech. But the most important thing was for Maria to feel comfortable and confident in herself. They knew her story was powerful and could inspire many more people. When the day of the event arrived, Maria found herself backstage, nervous but determined. She wore a simple navy blue suit that Nayib had given her for the occasion, and in her hands she held the notes for her speech. "Everything will be fine," Nayib said, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Just remember why you're here." The event's presenter announced her name, and the room filled with applause. Maria took a deep breath and walked onto the stage. The spotlight's glare was blinding, but the warmth of the audience gave her strength. "Good afternoon, everyone," she began, her voice growing stronger with each word. "My name is Maria, and a few years ago I was in a situation I never thought I could overcome. But thanks to people like Nayib and the New Dawn Project, today I'm here to tell you that it's always possible to start anew." With each sentence, the audience became more captivated. Maria shared her story with moving honesty, not hiding the dark moments but also highlighting every small achievement that had marked her path to recovery. "The most important thing I learned in this process is that no one is truly alone," she said, looking directly at the audience. "There's always someone willing to help, and sometimes that help can come from the people we least expect." When she finished her speech, the room erupted in applause. Several people stood up to give her a standing ovation, and Maria felt a lump in her throat, unable to believe what she was experiencing. Nayib awaited her at the foot of the stage with a smile full of pride. "You were incredible, Maria. You were meant to be here." The hours that followed were a whirlwind of emotions. Many people approached to congratulate her and share their own stories, thanking her for her courage and for giving them hope. Maria realized that her experience had a much greater value than she had imagined. Back at her hotel, Maria sat with Nayib on the terrace, contemplating the city's lights. "I never thought my life would take this direction," she said with a mix of nostalgia and gratitude. "But now I know that every step, even the hardest ones, led me exactly where I needed to be." "The world needs more people like you, Maria," Nayib replied. "People who turn their pain into strength, who don't give up, and who are willing to make a difference." As she prepared to sleep, Maria received a message on her phone. It was from one of the women she had met at the shelter, thanking her for her support and telling her she had found a job. Maria smiled, feeling a deep inner peace, knowing that her mission was just beginning. The return home after the international recognition was a mix of emotions for Maria. On one hand, she was grateful for everything she had experienced in Geneva. On the other hand, she felt the responsibility to do even more with everything she had learned. Her speech had touched many lives, and now more people wanted to get involved in the New Dawn Project. Upon her arrival at the airport, she was greeted by local journalists, friends, and some of the beneficiaries of the program. Cameras captured every moment as Maria tried to remain composed. She wasn't used to so much attention, but she knew this was an opportunity to continue spreading the message of hope. Nayib welcomed her with a warm embrace. "Welcome home, Maria. This is just the beginning." And he was right. What followed was an unprecedented wave of solidarity. Local businesses began offering financial support to the program, and several volunteers joined to expand the activities. New workshops for training, psychological counseling, and job reintegration services were created for those who needed them most. New Dawn became a true beacon of hope for the entire community. Maria, however, did not lose her humility. Despite all the recognition, she continued working side by side with the people who came to the program, listening to their stories and offering them the same support she had once received. Each day reminded her of the importance of staying true to her roots and not forgetting where she had come from. One day, while organizing a meeting at the community center, Nayib arrived with an unexpected proposal. "Maria, I've been thinking about something," he said, looking at her seriously. "What do you think about making a documentary about your story and the impact of New Dawn?" Maria was silent for a moment. The idea was overwhelming but also exciting. "A documentary," she repeated, trying to process it. "Do you think anyone would want to see it?" "Of course," Nayib replied with a smile. "Your story deserves to be told, not just because it's inspiring, but because it can change lives." The production of the documentary was a comprehensive process. A film crew followed Maria for several months, capturing her day-to-day life, the stories of the people who went through the program, and the most emotional moments of her journey. The result was a moving piece that quickly went viral on social media. The documentary not only showcased the human side of the story, but also served to highlight the challenges faced by people in vulnerable situations. It was a call to action that moved hearts and awakened consciences. Comments began to flood social media. "Thank you for giving a voice to those who don't have one. This story reminded me that there's always hope, even in the darkest moments." Maria and Nayib are a true example of what it means to never give up. The impact was such that several governments and international organizations wanted to replicate the New Dawn model in other cities. Maria was invited to multiple events to share her experience, but she always returned home to the place where it all began, because she knew that was where her true purpose lay. One day, while walking through the community center, she encountered a young woman who had joined the program months earlier. The girl looked at her with tears in her eyes and said, "Maria, thank you for never giving up. Thank you for believing in people like me when we don't even believe in ourselves." Maria felt her heart fill with deep emotion. That was the true power of what they were doing, changing lives, one person at a time. That night, while sharing a quiet dinner with Nayib, Maria reflected on everything they had achieved together. "I never imagined my life would take this path," she said with a nostalgic smile. "But now I know that every step, every difficulty, every small victory led me exactly where I needed to be." Nayib nodded, raising his glass to toast. "To you, Maria, to the future, and to all the lives you will still change." That night, as she looked at the stars from her window, Maria felt a peace she had never known before. She knew the road wouldn't always be easy, but she also knew she was exactly where she needed to be. Her story was a testament to the fact that love, compassion, and perseverance could change the world, one life at a time.